So in this video, I want to give you a bit of the backstory behind the academic plan for the fall and how Wake Forest arrived at the four modalities we did that you all chose from as you were pursuing your plan for delivering your courses this fall. So like many institutions, Wake Forest was under a number of constraints as we were thinking through our academic plan. The first of these, most obviously, was space in the context of a socially distanced COVID classroom. If you haven't seen videos of our spaces before, here's one from Tribble Hall. And what you'll see here is that it wasn't just a slight reduction in capacity. It was actually quite substantial, and many of our classes lost 75% capacity, and some of our large lecture halls lost even more. So we just simply could not, with the current schedule, have anywhere near 100% capacity of students in in-person classes. And in fact, it seemed as if without a lot of maneuvering and creative problem solving, we would only be able to have around 25% of our courses in person, given the space constraints. The second concern that we had was scheduling. We could have reduced some of the concerns about scheduling if we radically recreated the schedule. If we had pushed courses into the evening or into the weekends, or if we had radically rethought our schedule and enrolled in a block plan that some schools are doing, we could have recovered more space. But we also quickly realized that our students had already registered for courses in the fall, that our faculty had already set their times and their schedules, and we simply didn't have a lot of time in the summer when we were planning this to radically rebuild a new schedule and have students re-register. So we very quickly realized that we had to keep the same schedule, which only made the space constraints that much more pressing. Then on top of space constraints, so it wasn't just a matter of how do we figure out how to deliver our courses when we can't fit all students in in-person classes, we also had the added element of how to accommodate students who were learning outside of Wake Forest and Winston-Salem. So this could be international students who could not get back into the country, but it could also be those students who didn't feel safe being on campus, whether they were because they were immunocompromised or they just didn't think it was appropriate to be on a campus of college students during a pandemic, or perhaps they got sick or were quarantined. And so we had to be prepared to accommodate students who could not be in the classroom and to make sure that they had access to the Wake Forest education. So these were our constraints, but we also had some principles that guided us in our decision making, at least on the academic team of the planning scenario team. Happily, the first principle and the most important principle for us on the academic team was student learning. So whatever we decided to do, no matter how much it cost, no matter how complicated it was, we wanted to make sure that it was going to be the best for our students and particularly for their learning, that it was based on evidence and research on teaching and learning, that we had good strategies in place, and that we thought it would be manageable to implement successfully for our students. Secondly, it was really important to us that we prioritize so far as possible in this moment choice. That was true with respect to students and choosing how they wanted to learn, but also, and importantly, true with respect to faculty and choosing how they thought it most appropriate to teach their discipline and their students. Now, again, we couldn't provide absolute choice in this scenario, but we wanted to, whatever we decided, to provide as much choice as possible. And then finally, this wasn't as important, but it was certainly something that we thought about when we were thinking of solutions, was if we were going to invest a great deal of money, we wanted to make sure that that investment would pay dividends long term, that it wouldn't be a waste of resources for this emergency, that it would actually help us solve the current problem and also improve things long term, that we were fiscally responsible. So when we sat down with these constraints and these principles to come up with solutions, there were a couple of options that rose to the surface because many other institutions were considering them that we quickly thought weren't ideal as universal default plans for Wake Forest. And these two options were, first, asking, or in fact requiring, faculty to teach multiple sections of their course. So if you can't fit 40 students in a single section, well, let's have 4 sections of 10 students each, and oh, by the way, make one of them online. This would have solved the problem, at least some extent. There'd still be some scheduling issues, but it would have quadrupled the workload of faculty. So for obvious reasons, it was something faculty weren't excited about. We weren't excited about it. We dismissed it pretty quickly. The other approach that was quite common and many schools are still pursuing today is that of what we're calling simulcasting, where essentially the instructors teach their courses as they normally would in person, and then any student who can't physically be in the space because of social distancing requirements can't be in the class because they are international students or they're sick or other reasons, will then just participate remotely by watching a streamed version of the course. Uh, we decided this wouldn't work for the institution, and also the CAT has some thoughts about why this probably isn't ideal in most cases. We're going to have another set of videos on those, and so if you're thinking about this as an option, we encourage you to watch those videos. But we decided institutionally we didn't want to force faculty into that way of teaching the way some institutions are. So by dismissing these two sort of elegant options in terms of logistical fixes, that meant we had to come up with maybe a little bit more complex solution to the challenges that we had. So our solution was to look at the curriculum level rather than at the course level. So instead of trying to figure out how to accommodate remote and in-person students at the course level, we thought we would accommodate remote and in-person students at the curriculum level. So we would have some fully online courses for those students who needed to be remote and some face-to-face courses for students who need to be in person. But even doing that wouldn't be enough to sort of resolve our space issues and to also accommodate those students who needed to be remote. So that's where we also decided to implement an option of blended courses that have rotating cohorts. And again, we'll have future videos on that and how we think you might tackle those in terms of your pedagogy. But then also to further accommodate students who were remote, we also added this new animal, which is called Blended with an Online Pathway, which we will share more about in future videos. So I hope this gives you some of the backstory so you understand the constraints and the principles that guided us, and that you can use those constraints and principles as you think through how you want to teach your courses to make sure that you are prepared for those constraints and also are making sure to teach in a way that is consistent with those principles as well.